Have you ever felt like you're in a constant battle with yourself, like there's a tug of war between who you want to be and the messy, complicated reality of who you actually are? Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century, believed this internal struggle wasn't a flaw or a failure. Instead, it's what makes us human. Today we're diving into Carl Jung's ideas on balancing light and dark, good and evil, and most importantly, learning to accept all parts of ourselves, the ones we love and the ones we'd rather ignore. Carl Jung grew up in Western culture, steeped in its philosophies, traditions, and ways of thinking. But he didn't stop there. He also explored Eastern philosophies, ideas from Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism. What I admire about Carl Jung is that he didn't abandon his Western roots in favor of something shiny and new. Instead, he worked to balance these two worlds. He said, essentially, why choose when you can learn from both? This idea of balance shaped everything Carl Jung believed. It's like the yin-yang symbol, light and dark, working together. For Carl Jung, opposites weren't enemies, they were partners. And this perspective is what led him to challenge one of the biggest assumptions we make about life. Let's talk about how we see good and evil. Movies, books, history. All these stories frame life as a battle between good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains. But Carl Jung didn't see it that way. He believed this idea of an absolute, unresolvable conflict between good and evil wasn't how the universe works. Life isn't black and white. It's all shades of gray. Here's the thing. Carl Jung wasn't saying we should excuse terrible actions or ignore injustice. He just believed that when we label someone as pure evil, we distance ourselves from the uncomfortable truth that the potential for darkness exists in all of us. He put it perfectly when he said, "To the degree that you condemn others and find evil in others, you are to that degree unconscious of the same thing in yourself." That's not easy to hear, right? But it makes sense. How often do we criticize someone for being selfish or arrogant only to realize later we've done the same thing ourselves? This brings us to one of Carl Jung's most famous ideas, the shadow. The shadow is the part of yourself you don't want to look at. Your fears, insecurities, anger, or even desires you think you're not supposed to have. It's all the stuff you shove into a corner and hope no one notices, including you. But here's the twist. Ignoring your shadow doesn't make it go away. In fact, the more you avoid it, the more it controls you. Carl Jung believed that when we refuse to face our own darkness, we end up projecting it onto others. We see someone else as the problem, as the villain, as the bad guy. And this projection has real-world consequences. Think about history. How many wars, persecutions, and atrocities have happened because one group decided another group was evil? Carl Jung would argue that this kind of thinking happens because people can't or won't face the shadow within themselves. To see how dangerous this can get, let's look at an extreme example. Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust. When we hear about someone like Eichmann, it's natural to think he's a monster. And yeah, the things he did were monstrous. But Carl Jung would challenge us to think deeper. Carl Jung wasn't saying we should excuse Eichmann or people like him. Far from it. If we're faced with someone committing horrific acts, of course, we should fight against it. But Carl Jung warned us against seeing someone like Eichmann as pure, irredeemable evil. Why? Because when we do that, we let ourselves off the hook. We say, that kind of darkness has nothing to do with me. But the truth is, the potential for darkness exists in all of us. That doesn't mean we're all villains, it just means we're human. And recognizing that humanity is essential if we want to avoid repeating history. Here's where things get a little lighter, literally. Carl Jung didn't just focus on the shadow's darkness, he also saw its humor. He had this great quote about how, behind every respectable facade, there's a little bit of an unreconstructed bum. And honestly, isn't that true? No matter how put together we seem, there's always a part of us that's messy, flawed, or downright ridiculous. For Carl Jung, humor wasn't about making fun of others, it was about being able to laugh at yourself. He believed that when we accept our imperfections, we can stop taking ourselves so seriously. Think about it. How many times have you made a mistake only to look back later and laugh about it? That laughter is healing. It's a reminder that being human is messy, and that's okay. Humor, for Carl Jung, wasn't just lighthearted, it was profound. It's what happens when you stop pretending to be perfect and start embracing your whole self, flaws and all. Here's something you might not expect. Carl Jung didn't see the shadow as purely negative. Sure, it's where your fears and insecurities live, but it's also where a lot of your strength and creativity come from. He once compared the shadow to manure. Gross, I know, but think about it. Manure helps roses grow. In the same way, our struggles and flaws can lead to incredible growth if we're willing to face them. For example, your anger might feel like a problem, but it could also be the fire that drives you to stand up for what's right. Your insecurities might make you cautious, but they could also push you to work harder or learn more. At the heart of Carl Jung's work is this idea: we can't grow or heal until we accept ourselves, shadow and all. He said, we cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. That line hits hard because it's so true. How often do we try to fix ourselves by rejecting the parts we don't like? It doesn't work. Real change comes from understanding and embracing those parts, not fighting them. Carl Jung admitted this isn't easy. He said, simple things are always the most difficult, but the reward is worth it. When we accept ourselves, we stop projecting our fears onto others. We become more compassionate toward ourselves and the people around us. So what does all this mean for us? It means the next time you catch yourself feeling angry, jealous, or insecure, don't shove it down. Don't pretend it's not there. Instead, get curious. Ask yourself, what's this feeling trying to tell me? Carl Jung taught that life isn't about choosing between light and dark. It's about finding balance, embracing the complexity of who we are, and using that understanding to grow. Here's a challenge. This week, when you catch yourself judging someone, or even judging yourself, pause. Take a deep breath. Try to see the shadow behind that judgment. And remember, the parts of us we're most afraid of are often the ones with the most to teach us. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. How do you deal with your own shadow? Have you ever found strength in a part of yourself you once rejected? Let's talk about it. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and don't forget, it's okay to be a little messy. That's where the magic happens.